Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back again to do you another video on this Saturday, this ugly Saturday. It should not take long. We're just going to begin 10.1. Fortunately for you, and fortunately for you, it's not much math, it's not much writing, arithmetic uh, that you're going to have to do. For the most part, you're just taking notes because we're doing nothing but words today. Uh, so let's get going. Analyzing surveys and samples. First off, I just want to cover a couple of things that we need to know about. First thing we need to know about is a survey. All a survey is a study of one or more characteristics of a group. You guys have probably done surveys before or something like that. Pretty much that's a nice formal definition of a survey. Now, the entire group you want information from is called the population. And you guys have heard the word population before, right? So if you want to survey the entire population, then you've heard of that before. That's called a census. In fact, they're going to do another one in, what's that, like 4 years or something like this, 2016? All right. So here's the thing. Sometimes a census is difficult to do because typically when they do the census, they're just walking around to everybody in the country, asking them about their homes and all this other stuff. So a lot of people don't resort to census. That's why it's done every 10 years or so. What they more so like to do is they like to get a sample. All a sample is a part of the population. So they take a piece of the population and as that sample and pretty much to look at just what those are going to what those results are going to turn out, right? So with that, there's various sampling methods that you can go through. First sampling method that you can go through is a random sample. A random sample, pretty much every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. So another, just a random, just picking people at random. All right. If you want to get a little bit more distinct, you can have a stratified random sample, right, where you are dividing the population into distinct groups, right, and then selecting randomly in those groups, within those groups. So you can stratify your random samples. The word stratify is pretty much divide, right? You can have a systematic sample. In other words, there's a rule that selects members, a rule that you use to select members, or anything like that. You have a convenience sample. The easiest members of the population are selected. So, and then you have the self-selected sample. In other words, people volunteer to be part of the sample that you have. Now, each one of these are probably going to yield different results, obviously, because you're going to get different kind of classifications, different people, different members in your groups to sample. But we'll go through some examples. I hope you guys are writing these down. My advice to you is to write these things down so that you at least have notes of it when you go back and do your homework and stuff like that. So if you need to, go ahead and pause the video and just do like little notes of the things. Notice we've done nothing but words so far, no arithmetic or working anything out yet. Great, I'll give you a problem though. Say the owners of a company with several factories conduct a survey to determine whether employees are informed about safety regulations. At each factory, 50 employees are chosen at random to complete the survey. Identify the population and classify the sampling method. So they want you to identify the population. They want you to identify the population. Where's my highlighter? First things first. In identifying the population, in other words, where are they choosing from? Who's the people that they're surveying? And notice what you'll see is that the population is just the company's employees, right? You'll get that from at each factory 50 employees are chosen, right? just reading, right? Then from there, classify the sampling method. Now remember, you have the list of sampling methods. And which one of those looks like it's happening here? And what you'll notice is that it is a stratified sampling method. The reason why it's stratified, remember what a stratified sampling method is? It's pretty much the population is divided into distinct groups and then members are selected randomly from that. What they're doing here is they're dividing the population by factory. So if they're dividing the population by factory, it's being stratified. All right. Now, what if the owner surveys each employee whose last name begins with an M? Classify the sampling method now. Remember, we had our list of sampling methods. And from our list of sampling methods, actually, let me make sure that this is erased for you. We had our list of sampling methods. Now, which one does it look like it's actually doing? And if you look back at it, it tells you that the owner surveys each one whose last name begins with the letter M. Actually, I'd probably be in there, right? That's a systematic sample because now there's a rule. So since there's a rule now, you have a systematic sample. Let's deal with what a bias sample is. You guys have heard the word bias before. A bias sample pretty much is just a bias sample for the most part is basically a sample that is not representative of everybody in the group or pretty much the entire population. If it does not represent the entire population, then the sample is considered biased. For example, if they only ask people in Wyoming if they like living next to water, it's a biased sample because you're not taking into consideration the people that actually live next to water. That's a good example, bad example. I'll give you more examples when we get to class, all right? But for the most part, everybody should be represented in the sample. So samples have to be diverse, especially in this country. The sample has to be diverse to represent everybody. If it's not, then that sample is actually biased. Do people do bias samples? Probably. I'm not sure. What you'll actually get is parts of the population may be overrepresented, underrepresented. You'll get some sample that actually see something like that. Hopefully, we can discuss this in class, and we can come up with examples ourselves of things that are bias samples, so on and so forth. Right? So how about this? Let's identify a potentially biased sample. Say in the first example, suppose the owner's question 50 workers chosen at random from one factory. Is the method likely to result not in a bias sample? Is the method likely to result in a bias sample? My reading is, you guys read better than me. I'm just saying. So really, that's the question. Are we going to get a bias sample from the first question that we end up having, where 50 workers are chosen at random? Some people, you got to take time and think about it, like, is it going to be yes or is it going to be no? And I'm here to tell you that yes, it is going to result in a biased sample. He chose one factory. So if he chose one factory, remember there's 50 factories. Well, I'm sorry, there's a whole bunch of factories. So if people at other factories might have different opinions depending on their working conditions or their location or what they're producing, or there's a lot of different variations that can come into play when they're talking about that kind of sample. So it can't be just a sample of one factory and then that's a pretty good sample, and that sample's not biased. Absolutely, it's biased. All right. So you have biased samples. The same way you can have biased samples, you can have biased questions. We all are guilty of asking, myself included, we're all guilty of asking biased questions. For the most part, a biased question is just a question that suggests a particular response. I've noticed that about myself, and I'm trying my best to reconcile that, or to pretty much make that improve on not asking biased questions. One biased question that you probably have heard before or not is don't you think I'm pretty? It suggests a response. You know, it suggests a response of whether or not somebody's pretty or not, right? The second one, some of you have probably heard, is since Kobe Bryant has more championships than LeBron James, isn't he a better player? That suggests that obviously that's suggesting a particular response. Regardless if the right response will be yes or no, it's still suggesting a particular response. So I have something for you. Now let's see if you can tell whether the question is potentially biased or not, and then explain why. And if in fact it is biased, I want you to rewrite the question so that it's not. My first question: don't you agree that the voting age should be lowered to 16 because many 16-year-olds are responsible and informed? Is that a biased question or an unbiased question? I'll give you time to respond. What do you think? This question is biased. The reason why is because you're suggesting something. Like, oh, really, that's the way you pick it up. If in fact the question itself is suggesting something, then you know that this question is biased. Hold up, tea break. Alright, I'm good. So, if we wanted to rewrite the question, a better way to actually rewrite the question is, do you think the voting age should be lowered to 16? No response suggested, nothing. That's just pretty much an unbiased question right there. Second question: do you think the city should risk an increase in pollution by allowing expansion of the Northern Industrial Park? Is that biased or unbiased? This question is biased. You're suggesting something. You're actually, if you're suggesting something in your question, then your question is biased. Maybe we can all do a better job in calling out biased questions and asking someone to rephrase. A better way to probably rephrase that question, rewrite it, is: do you think the city should allow the expansion of the Northern Industrial Park? Absolutely. So we have something that looks like this that can actually have. Now we have some other questions that we probably can go through. In a survey about Americans' interest in soccer, the first 25 people admitted to a high school soccer games. Oh, that didn't even make. Admitted to high school soccer games were asked, "How interested are you in the world's most popular sport, soccer? Is the sampling method likely to result in a biased sample?" I'll allow you to explain. I'll allow you to discuss that, and maybe we can find out in class if in fact you think that's going to result in a biased sample. And then another question I'll have is the question potentially biased? And if in fact it is, I want you to reword it. So we'll probably deal with this more in class, but this is the question I'll probably begin class with, just to see if you guys understand where I'm coming from. And if not, we'll probably go further into it. So that's the end of this video. I hope you got a little bit out of it. And if you did, great. Until next time.